Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations in Horror. I am your host, Kevin L. Powers, and we have a great show for you this week. Um, our special guest is someone who is very fond of our show and been here plenty of times. His name is Thomas Tinnerello, and tonight we have a very special film for you because it's one of my favorite films and it's one of his favorite films, and so we hope to be gushing over this film literally, I guess.
Gushing like blood that comes from someone's neck in this movie.
So there you go. We are going to be talking about Lucio Fulci's Zombie. But first of all, if you've never watched the show, let us tell you a little bit about our special guest. Thomas, take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name's Thomas Tinnerello. I'm a screenwriter, novelist, part-time podcaster, and I like cats. Not the musical. I mean, literally, I got two beautiful cats. So yeah, I've been doing that since I was 19 years old, loving cats and writing stuff. Usually horror stuff, actually. Although occasionally I slip into sci-fi a little bit. But yeah, so that's pretty much me.
All right, so I'm gonna venture off today because this is one of my favorite movies. I'm gonna tell everyone a little bit about me and the fact that I'm a huge zombie film lover. This is actually the very first film that I ever watched that Lucio Fulci ever did, and after that, I was hooked on all of his fucking movies. But so that everyone knows, I am a huge zombie film lover. And George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead is still considered my all-time favorite movie. Uh, I literally watch that movie at least once a year. Uh, so you could get an idea of just the type of films that I love. I like other films too, but I'm a huge zombie horror film lover, and I watch even the crappiest crap that comes out. And trust me, people,
There's a lot of
a lot of crap out there that gets released every year that has to deal with the horror and zombie genre. But that's a little bit about me, and I'm sure we're going to get into it more as we discuss this amazing film, or at least in my opinion, an amazing film.
How old were you when you first saw this masterpiece, Kevin?
Oh my God. I saw this on accident. I must have been 14, 15 years old. When
That's
I
about right.
Yeah. I saw it about 14, 15 years old on accident. I saw the version that actually called it Zombie 2. So I
Ooh.
think I never saw the first Zombie, but I was gonna watch Zombie 2 anyways. I did not know that the original Dawn of the Dead by George Romero was called Zombie in Italy, and this was a quote unquote a sequel to that one. I didn't know that watching it. The very first version of this movie I had or watched was from the library of all places. They rented it out to a 15-year-old. And so I
So
saw
you rented it on VHS from the public library.
I
Nice.
did. I did because they didn't check your age at a library. Surprisingly, they didn't seem to care what you rented. I rented a lot of horror movies from the library for the very first time when I was really really young, and so I watched this one, and among other things, now I got on my tirade of talking about George Romero. I also saw his movie Martin for the first time by renting it from the library. Uh, but
Mm.
I was a huge fan watching this movie, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I didn't realize it wasn't an actual sequel, and it has nothing to do with Dawn of the Dead at all.
Well, in a sense, though, although it must have been a delight for you to find out, like, oh, I have already seen Zombie. It was called Dawn of the Dead. Yay! But to be fair, there's two things about this. Number one, this movie was not originally written as a sequel to Dawn of the Dead. According to IMDb, the husband and wife screenwriting team who wrote this movie, what was their name? It's very hard to pronounce, which is sad because I am Italian and I have a very hard to pronounce last name. But you do it very well, Kevin, and I'm very thankful for you for that. Anyway, but like it was. Oh, here we go. Husband and writing team. Well, the name of, you can edit this out. Elisa Briganti and Dardano Sacchinetti. who
But
are husband and wife.
yeah,
And what's funny is they work together to write this bunch of other knockoffs of better movies like Bronx Warriors and Gladiators of the Year 2070, and of course the classic Jaws knockoff Devilfish, and the not a knockoff of anything Lamberto Brava's Demons or Demoni.
which I own all of them.
That's awesome on 4K, I'm sure, if they're available.
Uh,
But
just Demons. Demons I do have. Either I can't remember if I got the steel box of them, so I can't remember what they actually are. But the rest of them, I'm a huge Italian film lover, so I have a huge collection of Italian giallo and Italian horror movies. You know.
man, but anyway, this movie was written before Dawn of the Dead came out in Italy. So the writers, so these two people, they had no idea about Dawn of the Dead even existing until after this movie was written. Also, I think it's kind of cute that in the end, gets the final credit. So he and his wife wrote this movie together, and he gave her credit.
Mhm.
He never even took it. I think that's romantic. But but anyway, yeah. So, but truthfully, even if you're going to take the position, oh, it's supposed to be a sequel to Zombie 2, aka Dawn of the Dead, which is what Dawn of the Dead's Italian title was, even so, that version of Dawn of the Dead that the Italians got in the early 80s is not what you and I saw in the States. Because Dario Argento was a very good friend of the guy who made Suspiria, of course. He was very good friends with George Romero, and Romero was like, "Hey, you know what? We're gonna distribute Dawn of the Dead in Italy. Here, why don't you take it and cut it up, edit it to fit, the sensibilities of Italian audiences? Because I guess Italian audiences won't understand the whole humor of zombies getting pies in the face and stuff like that. So cut all that crap out and just put a lot of goblin music everywhere and just go nuts with it." So that's exactly what Dario Argento did. He cut the movie not in half, but he made it a slim, I think, 95 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, this version of Dawn of the Dead that they got was called Zombie with an I, Dawn of the Dead, and it was much leaner, meaner, more actiony movie. And that's what this movie was supposed to be a sequel to, but only after the fact. And how late after the fact is production history legend. We might get into later, but it's a thing.
Well, considering that there are a lot of, I guess, not really consistent sequels to this, Zombie 3, 4, they're all kind of standalone films that just got labeled as a sequel to Zombie because it was such a internationally, financially viable name and successful.
Yeah.
So, but
at least it's not as convoluted as the Demons franchise.
oh yeah, I forgot about that one too. That one also has a lot of unofficial sequels.
Yeah.
All right.
So I guess I'll go into, if you don't mind, like my origin story with this movie.
Yes, please.
You were at the tender age of 14 when you saw this, but I think was 40, maybe 39. No, I must have been 41. Yeah, I must have been 40, 41 because I saw this movie at the tail end of COVID. Maybe like way through COVID, because it had just become available, I think, on most streaming services. Because up until then, this movie was fairly hard to find on, it wasn't streaming anywhere when streaming was, nascent. But lately, I think some of it had to do with the fact of like some of Fulci's movies had been recut and re-edited, retitled in some cases in the States. And it wasn't until like the late 90s, the early 2000s when a lot of them were rediscovered and restored to their original length and original titles, and people started rediscovering Fulci's work. I think the last couple of decades have seen kind of a Fulci-sance, if you will. So I think in COVID we were We actually moved out of our house in Powder Springs. We had a nice 2-story house, but we had too many stairs, and I guess we just had some COVID cabin fever, and we decided to sell it. So we did, but we took way too long to find another house. So we ended up staying at my sister-in-law's house in a grungy part of town in a much smaller house with a 5-person family. It wasn't nice. It wasn't good. So I think I watched this movie, City of the Living Dead, and the Beyond, one right after the other on this cell phone right here.
Oh my God!
When I was sleeping on sister-in-law's couch late at night, feeling cold, so like huddled. You can picture me with my little cell phone, huddled over watching Zombie for the first time on a little cell phone, and it was still amazing.
Wow, that's intriguing. Well, I just saw City of the Living Dead again because I got it on Blu-ray, and so I want to see it crystal clear. Because unfortunately, when I was growing up, Zombie and the rest, and City of the Living Dead and the Beyond, which I saw as Seven Doors of Death, I believe that's what the I saw these things when I was younger, so I saw the alternate versions of all these movies. We're all grainy, and so I've been slowly getting Blu-ray versions of them to actually watch them, so they're not grainy. I want to see remastered versions of some of my favorite movies. And I started with Fulci's movies, although unfortunately a lot of his films are just now being discovered, and some of them, are not getting the high def treatment. They're just getting either a standard DVD copy, or I've got like an Italian region free version of a lot of his films. I still have not seen all of his films because some of them, like you said before, are very hard to find. So thankfully, Zombie is not one of those films that is hard to find.
Yeah, people forget that Fulci he didn't just do horror movies. He did, I think I did the math. Fulci was like in his mid-40s, and then he did Zombie. He had already made like 30 movies by the time he did this movie. So I think altogether, I looked on his IMDb, I think there's about 50-something movies credited to him.
Yeah.
And so he had a very long, varied career. And before he did this movie, he was known mostly for comedies and westerns.
Yep. He did a lot of crime movies too.
Yeah, exactly. So, that makes sense that this was basically kind of a director for hire thing. It was. I mean, actually, it had a different, according to IMDb and the research I did, and you probably know this already, but hi, Gumpy. That was my cat, Gumpy. Whoa. You can cut this out. He wants to join us. So anyway, but yeah, there was another director on this movie when it was supposed to be more of an action movie. This is probably before they saw Dawn of the Dead. And Fulci comes in, and I imagine, now I've seen like most of a documentary about Fulci's life, but I didn't get that far into it. I didn't get that far into the point where he made Zombie. But I imagine he saw the script to this movie. Maybe there had been footage shot already, and I imagine his thought process was something like this. I don't think I'm gonna be making the best zombie movie ever made, but I'll tell you what I'm gonna make the most zombie movie ever made.
You know what? Now that I think about it, you're probably absolutely correct. That's probably exactly what he was thinking when he made this movie.
I'm going to put he's going to make this the most zombie movie of all time. If you think about it, it is. Because this movie has every single thing up until that point that makes a zombie. You have, of course, the Romero flesh-eating zombie part of it, which of course is derived from not even any legends about the undead, about zombies. We'll get into that in a minute. But that more derives itself from Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, which Romero read and just said, "Hey, we should make a prequel to I Am Legend." But instead of blood sucking, they're flesh eating. Bam! Zombies got created. The modern zombie, at least.
Yeah. Remember, he kept calling them ghouls before they got dubbed zombies.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. He didn't call them zombies until Dawn of the Dead. But
So,
then, so you have that kind of zombie, and of course the lore of shoot him in the head or destroy the brain, they're dead.
mm-hmm.
So that's in this movie. You also have like the mad scientist in this, the Frankenstein
Yep.
aspect. Then you also have the viral aspect to it, the plague aspect to it, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, because I really think that's a huge part of this movie thematically, is the idea of viruses and how they spread. But the biggest part of this, of course, is what really wasn't a whole lot dealt with except outside of, say, a Val Lewton movie, I Walk with a Zombie, is voodoo culture, and action ideas about what makes a zombie. And truth be told, I think that's the best part of it, because as I tell people often, my zombies are one of my favorite monsters because they're the only monster that actually exists. Uh, because in Haiti, they do make zombies. I mean,
Yep.
they're not literally the living dead, but they might as well be.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some of it, just like the whole process of how it makes a zombie is so fascinating. So Fulci took all that stuff
Mm-hmm.
and said, we're going to touch on all of it. We're going to put it all in there. And while we're at it, we're going to make fun of Jaws. We're going to do all that stuff in one freaking movie. And it's going to be under 90 minutes. Boom.
Well, once it starts, it's so for people who may have not seen Zombie, once the action starts, it never stops. You have a group of people who venture off to an island in search of someone, and of course they get stuck in the middle of this plague slash voodoo zombie takeover of the island, and they can't. And the next thing they know, they're just trying to get off the island as fast as possible. Unfortunately, there are a ton of zombies rising from their graves, and everyone who recently dies becomes a zombie, and all they do is want to flesh eat. It's not the deepest movies.
That's another thing you mentioned, rising from the. That is something that we think of in folklore about people coming back, rising from the grave to get revenge, and like old ghost stories, things like that. That we think of as a zombie in some ways. That was not in Romero's version, because remember, Romero's version, it was always the unburied dead.
Yeah.
So there are no Romero zombie movie you will ever see a zombie rising from the grave. This movie not only gives you zombies rising from the grave, spoiler, it gives you zombie rising from the grave POV camera.
Yeah.
With dirt and dust flaking off the lens as it rises, and you see the sky and the trees, which I don't think anybody else has ever done that. Like,
Well, I think that's one of the most enduring qualities of the film, even though it lacks a really deep story. It's the fact that there are so many great individual ideals in this film, and so many great, I like to say kills, but death scenes in this film that people hadn't seen before. And it's something that even today, despite the fact that there are better makeup artists and stuff like that, it still holds up. There's always a reason why this is Fulci's most talked about movie, other than The Beyond.
Yeah, I think there's, and in fact, this isn't in the IMDb thing, but on when Joe Bob Briggs did this on Last Drive-In, he talked about how the making of, and he probably heard this from Fabio Fabrizi, the composer, because he's one of the few guys who worked in this movie who's still alive.
Yeah.
He said that the ethos on this movie, in terms of staging the action, the makeup, especially the way they treat the way that they cinematically treat the zombies, though just the gore, everything, their ethos was constantly, we've got to do it better than the Mexican, because they thought George Romero was Mexican.
Oh, God.
They didn't know that he was Spanish from Pittsburgh. They thought he was Mexican. So they're like, we Italians, I gotta do it better than the Mexican. So if you look at it, actually, even though Romero's movies are more well written and more well acted, and sometimes better edited and stuff, in many ways they do it better than the Mexican, quote unquote. Because, I mean, sure, Savini's a legend, but Savini was still learning on Dawn of the Dead, and Savini wasn't even around for Night of the Living Dead. But the types of zombies that they have in Dawn, especially, I mean, they all kind of look the same. They're all blue for no reason, and I mean, yeah, they all have different costumes, so they all have this kind of different personality to them. And Flyboy Zombie at the end, he's kind of the more iconic zombie from that because of, you know, the actor really puts himself into that part. But then of course there's like the cleaver head zombie. But by and large, there's not a real like iconic look to them. But with this movie, they really just like went for the detail of creating a variety of different zombies and all look rotted, infected, eaten up, mummified, whatever. I mean, you have zombies from like the 1600s in this movie. You have zombies who were human beings 10 minutes ago. So you have almost every form of decomposition in here, short of skeleton.
That's a good point to say. That's a good point to say, because you're right. Romero's zombies and Dawn of the Dead do look very similar because Tom Savini went for a more thematic purpose. But in this movie, you get everything.
Yeah, he emphasizes quality over quantity, because actually, if you look at it very closely, and I counted, you never see more than 15 zombies on screen in this movie. You actually go frame by frame. There's more than 15 of them on screen at any given moment. It seems like there's a lot of them towards the end, especially but nope, there's no more than 15 of them.
He was being economical.
He was being very economical. But yeah, so I think let's go. You give us a nice 5,000-mile view of the whole thing. Let's go in for a more closer look, because there's so many things in this that deserve a fine tune.
All right, let's start. Let's break it down.
Let's break it down. I will say, like, before we even get into the movie, I want to say, like, I think before I even watched it on my phone, in the midst of the pandemic, I had known this movie by reputation. Like, I remember, like, my first memory of knowing it existed was going through some magazine, like a film magazine or a horror magazine or something, and I saw, I think, the being sold on VHS or like early DVD or something, and I saw that iconic poster to this movie. Like, if people who don't know, this is one of the most iconic posters to a zombie movie ever. And when you see that poster with that brilliantly designed zombie face on it, you instantly want to see that movie. And I did, because I saw that poster with go on IMDb, people, and just look at this poster, because I cannot do it justice with my words. All I can tell you is, even with this photograph, I could tell that this thing did not look like a man in makeup. It looked like a mummified corpse was staring right back into my soul with its cavitied out eyes, which one of which is completely filled with real live worms, and smiling at you with crooked full teeth. And right above him is that brilliant catchphrase in English, which is, "We are going to eat you." And it is that poster that made me want to see this movie years ago. And then, cut 2 years later, I feel like that one zombie who comes very late in the movie, by the way, only on screen for a grand total of 2 minutes, maybe, sadly, he's become kind of like the symbol of this movie in a weird way because of that poster.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put the question to you before we really get into it, because I feel like this is a question worth asking, is, do you think there's a more iconic zombie, like single zombie, in movie history?
I don't. Other than, the closest you're going to get is Tarman from Return of the Living Dead, but Tarman was never on a poster. Like, this image is an iconic image for zombie culture. If any of our listeners out there read Eben Press's comic books, Zombie is the first comic book they released. and that zombie image they recreated as a drawn picture, and it's one of their iconic logos as well. Although, if you're following Even Press, they've now been sharing stuff with a new company for distribution, but they used to put out Fulci comic books, average of maybe two or three a year, specialty comic books. Some of the best comic books I've ever read. But Zombie, they did an amazing job on by interpreting it with new material and then doing a sequel to it, as though Fulci was still alive and did his own sequel to his iconic movie. That's how much of a culture this movie has gained over the years, how much of a cult it has gained. Evan Press, Evan Press is completely built around Fulci's films and stories, The Beyond and Zombie.
I want to read those comics because those look pretty amazing. I mean, I would say, like, going back to what we were talking about, like that guy, that creature's face. I think it's got to be, to me, it's going to be number one, the most iconic single zombie in history, partially because there's no mistaking what he is. He is not a skeleton. He's not some crazy guy in black and white or blue makeup. Full stop. Ask, is there anything that tops him? Well, I say no. Number two would probably be the little girl zombie from Night of the Living Dead, just because she is on the poster for that movie originally. And then maybe three after her be maybe Evil Ash from Army of Darkness. The Tar Man you mentioned, I would fully agree. When, of course, we got to mention Trash from Return of the Living Dead. Yeah. But I don't think anybody remembers her face from that movie, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. And of course we can't not talk about, talking iconic zombies. We gotta talk about Bub from Day of the Dead.
Yep.
His wrinkled face, I think, is part of what makes him iconic, and his Walkman that he's wearing around his head.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, maybe the Nazi zombies with goggles from Shockwaves.
Oh yeah, you know what? They're very memorable from their poster as well.
Mm-hmm. Julie Walker, definitely from Return of the Living Dead 3.
I would, yeah. For us zombie fans, she'd probably be a little bit higher on there, but yes, most definitely.
Yeah. And I'd throw in maybe, like, rounding out the bottom is like Evil Ed from Evil Dead 2. The one with like multiple teeth. And of course, a special one in my heart, the Michael Jackson zombie from Thriller. Probably the first zombie I may have ever seen.
You know what? As many people like to say that he's a zombie, I always picture that as one of those werewolf characters first before I do the zombie. I don't know why.
Yeah, probably because that happens first.
Yeah. Everyone wants to say, oh, he's one of the greatest zombies makeups ever. And I'm like, I always see it first as a werewolf, not so much a zombie. And I haven't seen Thriller in God knows how long. I know it's bad to say, but I haven't seen that whole music video in, oh shit, maybe 2+ decades. So I'm going by memory on that one.
Dude, you missed out a chance for it on Halloween last month, 2 months ago. But oh well, for guys like us, it's Halloween all year round.
Pretty much, I to be honest with you, I've seen his because he's passed away. His version of his Ghost 30-minute film before I've seen Thriller again.
You know what? I still haven't seen that.
Oh yeah, it's on YouTube. I don't know where you could find it other than YouTube. I don't think they ever released it.
No, they didn't. Yeah, because there's production difficulties. Yeah, I've heard Mick Garris talk about it, but I have never actually seen it. But
it's cool. It's cool. It's 30 minutes long. I think it's 30 minutes long, the final version. It's it's an amazing production.
So speaking again, going back to Zombie and that poster, and like I said, I heard it by reputation.
Yes.
In England, it was put on the video nasties list for you people grew up in the States like we did. Don't know about the video nasties, this really weird part in British culture history, where they tried, like the British Board of Film Censors basically tried to, have this little crusade where they rounded up anything that seemed excessively violent or vulgar or sexual at all, and they put them on this list that if a video store was caught carrying these things, they could be raided and lose their license and all that stuff. And Zombie was one of those movies.
Yep. Yep.
And it probably earns its reputation in a weird way.
Oh,
Oh my God.
one of the few films on the Video Nasties list that actually deserves to be on the list, because there's a lot of films on there that don't deserve to be on the list simply because of the title. They're on the list
Or the cover. So a lot of them are put
or
on
the
the tier
cover.
because the cover looks salacious and the really wasn't.
Oh
I,
my God.
so the very beginning of this movie, I feel, is like a masterclass, and this is how you start a freaking movie.
Hmm.
But it's so simple. It's almost like it also reminiscent of the Great Train Robbery, that silent movie where just the cowboy shoots the audience. And
Hmm.
this one, Dr. Reynard, we don't even know him yet. We just see a man in shadow with a gun shoots at us, and then we see he's shooting a zombie wrapped up in a shroud. Blood explodes. He drops, and then he just says,
The
"The
boat can.
boat can now tell the." Cut to Fabio Fabrizi's amazing music, and I'm like, that is how you start the freaking movie.
You mentioned him, and I need to get his book.
Yes,
Uh, yeah, he has a book. I need to get that book because he was such an iconic composer of music of Italian films. Like he did so many of them.
I
So
know. And he's still working. Last thing he did most recently that our audience might know of, he did the music for Puppet Master: The Littlest Reich, the latest Puppet Master movie.
that never ending. I have seen them all, so I know they're never ending.
So anyway, so the guy we saw, we find out later, was named Dr. Maynard,
Hmm.
and the boat he is referring to is basically. We find out later that it's owned by the zombie we just saw. We didn't realize this is the first zombie in this movie. That guy, that dead guy, he just shot. That's his boat, and it's Tisha Farrow's character is his daughter,
Hmm.
and she's all like, "I don't know what happened to my father. We have to find out what happened to him. This is his boat." So this boat like drifts into New York Harbor as a ghost ship, a la kind of like the Demeter in the Dracula novel, um, and comes in, and we see the cops, who by the way were played by real cops, real New York cops, and he gave them dialogue where they talk about, "Hey man, if we salvage the ship, we could get a really big reward." Apparently, that's a real thing. If you salvage a ship in the state of New York and there's nobody who claims it, you get like a lot of money. Apparently, so
Salvage.
yeah. So then we get the two cops go in there, and one of them goes below deck to see what's left of the crew. And what I think is cool is he goes down there, and then he sees just rot. He sees this, food left around. He sees flies. He sees centipedes. I don't know how centipedes got on this boat, but they're on a piano. And as we see them crawling on the piano, we hear this horrible wow 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 on Fabio Fabrizi's score. And I think it's funny how Fabio turns up his music when you see creatures dancing on a piano keyboard. I think that's a clever little pun visual joke. Like like the bugs are playing music for you. So, and then in we see, bam, first jump scare of this movie, a fat zombie. I don't know if I didn't realize this until I watched this movie again, but there's not a lot of fat zombies in in zombie movie history, aside from like this one in this movie, and then Tor Johnson in Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Tor Johnson.
I mean, he's pretty much it. I mean, they even like create a homage to Tor Johnson in Thriller.
Oh my God. I'm gonna have to put that on our list too. But keep
I, I
going.
I have already seen that. I'm not sure I want to see it again. I even seen the remake, which is not that much better,
Oh Jesus.
but it is interesting just because I'm a fan of some of the people who made it. But anyway, yeah. So like a fat zombie kills that one cop who turns out to be super important to the plot, weirdly enough. And that fat zombie comes up. Of course, the cop who sees him says, "Hands up in the air." Apparently, he doesn't know any of the rules about zombies, so he just shoots him in the chest twice, 2 or 3 times, and then the fat zombie falls into New York Harbor, and then the camera stays on it and pans up to see the city with the 2 towers, and you know what's going to happen. That's all we needed to see.
Mm-hmm.
But my only real caveat about this movie, well, the only big caveat I have, is that Fulci later on kind of spoils the ending by showing us much more than that. He shows us that cop who got bit taken to a morgue where he is examined by 2 very odd stereotypical coroners. One is a white guy and the other is this Afro black guy, and they just have this terrible like dialogue back and forth, not funny and just awkward. And they're like, "Give me the scalpel," and then we see the camera pan down and the zombie is about to get up and we assume eat these guys. But we cut back to our main action on the island, and Fulci almost like, I guess he expects us to forget about that whole thing for the next hour of the movie. I don't know. I thought he would have been so much better. He just cut out the whole morgue section from the movie completely.
Oh, that's an interesting take. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would have been if I writing this movie, I would have done that. Or if they released it nowadays, they definitely would have not telegraphed the ending too much. But anyway, like you said, yeah, so we got our two leads, Tisha Farrow, who of course is the older sister. I don't know how much she's older or younger than Mia Farrow, former Miss Woody Allen, and also the voice of one of the greatest animated movies of all time, The Last Unicorn, where she played the last unicorn.
Oh, right. That's right.
Yes. I watched that recently with my son for the first time. He watched it for the first time and he thought it was good. But he didn't fall in love with it as much as I did when I was this age, fortunately. But yeah, so Tisha Farrow didn't really have as great a career as her sister did. She kind of just did low budget movies in there and like a couple of horror movies. I think she retired from acting shortly after this movie.
Oh yeah, I think so too. Her career wasn't very long.
Yeah, because also I believe that Fulci still like enjoyed working with her so much that he wanted her to play the lead in The Beyond. But he ended up casting Katarina McCall, and the rest was history. So yeah, but some people have said probably because not necessarily because of this movie, but because of the role she did earlier in Anthropophagus, the Grim Reaper. She's gotten kind of a reputation as being a bad actress, but I don't think she's that bad.
I don't either, and I didn't really care for that movie.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god, that's
Yeah, for those of y'all who don't know, Anthropophagus is known almost exclusively as being the movie where a cannibal tears open a pregnant lady's stomach and eats the baby.
And I saw that once, and that was enough for me. That's rough for me to say because I've seen a lot of movies. I'm like, oh my god.
That's what I think whenever like people say, "Oh, that movie was so gory, it was so disgusting," or they talk about like a slasher movie as being like really gory. I'm like, dude, I watch zombie movies. This is nothing.
Yeah,
nothing. Really. But anyway, so like they. So I had this really funny note. Like after talking about, say, on Thanksgiving, this movie came back into my head, and I thought about what would happen. Okay.
What?
Yeah, it's just like it's like a weird thing that happened to me after I watched this movie again on Thanksgiving. I started thinking about what would happen to me if the zombies came to my house
on Thanksgiving.
No, like after Thanksgiving, just like it started like invading. Like, what would I do? What would be my plan of action? And I thought about like gathering up my family, going up into the attic, and how we would know if they were gone, and how we would get like I ended up getting like really creeped out because like it's a terrifying idea.
Well, of course it would. In the movie Zombie, they're stuck on an island. In the real world, if there's freaking zombies everywhere, where the hell are you gonna run?
You can't run there. Exactly. But like, there's the thing of like, there before they get to the island, though, I want to talk about this hilarious moment. This is the most funniest, weirdest kind of meet cute I've ever seen for two characters, because Tisha Farrow is wanting to investigate the death or the disappearance of her dad. So she goes to the boat that's being guarded by this cop who is listening to disco in his car. And I know this because it says in the subtitles disco music. And she goes in. There's chalk outline and bits of human blood and viscera on the floor and stuff. She's searching there, doing her thing. And then all of a sudden, bam, Ian McCulloch, intrepid reporter Peter West, comes up saying, shh, I've been here looking around, investigating this too. Maybe we should compare notes, yada, yada, yada. So they decide to team up, but then, the cop hears them and he's about to catch them. He's like, quick, just do what I say. We'll get out of this. And they pretend to be a couple making out in this boat. He's like, it was your idea to come here. You wanted something romantic. And they go and do this bit for this cop, and he buys it. What I don't get is this cop is supposed to buy that these two people decide we're just wandering around the New York harbor at night looking for a place to bang, and they pick a crime scene with chalk outline and everything. Like, what?
Fulci didn't have to make sense. It was all about atmosphere, mood, and the next kill.
I propose that I think about it. I propose that he meant for that moment to be funny, but Fulci has a very strange sense of humor.
Well, yeah, he has a really strange sense of humor. Did you see his movie Cat in the Brain? Jeez.
No, I have not. What is that?
That's where that's going to be a treat if you watch that. That's like bits and pieces of one of Fulci's unfinished films with him as he plays a character in his own movie. It's kind of whacked out, but it's a little crazy there. You just have to watch Cat in the Brain. I've seen a lot. It's weird. I've seen probably all of his horror movies. It is his earlier movies that are hard for me to find, and I have not seen all of them. I'm still on the lookout for some on my forever grocery store list of Fulci films. But
so yeah, they go and they get a ticket to Haiti, because they find out that I think it was Peter West who finds out that the boat was sailed out from Matul, some island in off of Haiti. So he's like, hey, let's go there. So the only scene one of the only scenes actually in New York, they got to go to the LaGuardia airport. They go there, and I thought it was hilarious that they go to what I thought was Haiti, but is clearly the Dominican Republic, because the cab driver speaks Spanish, not French, and the very offensive Caribbean music that is playing. And then I thought to myself, wow, there's a lot of sunshine and tropical island breezes in this horror movie I'm watching.
There is, and I never noticed that until you mentioned it. You are absolutely correct.
Like, this could definitely be put up there in the list, the hall of what we call like daylight horror. Movies that are horror movies that are almost entirely take place in broad daylight. Like, Midsummer and Now the Darkness, and a couple other examples I can't think of. I mean, I consider Jaws to be a horror movie, so we could put that up there on the list too.
Yeah.
But it's just going to show you don't need to have, misty fog and dead of night to be scary, although there is some of that movie. But, you can have broad daylight and beautiful sandy beaches, and something terrible can still happen to you there.
Well, what kind of brings me to my next discussion, or something you wanted me to make sure to bring up because it's one of my favorite scenes, which is the I guess the reprieve when our main actor decides she needs to go jump into a lake. and what she encounters in the ocean.
So first of all, I want to say before we get into that, we got to talk about that because that's what I love about. I'm not a huge fan of gratuitous nudity, but I feel like the way they handled that nudity was great because I don't. So like they get on this boat, which is owned by two people, a couple, who the man I will simply call Redbeard because he has a beautiful red beard. I don't remember his name. His name's Brian, but I call him Redbeard. And so Redbeard's girlfriend, whom I don't remember her name is Aretta, but I'm not going to remember that. So I'm going to call her Topless Skin Diver. So Topless Skin Diver gets topless and puts on scuba gear. She's saying, I'm going to get some shots because apparently she's a nature photographer. So, and while she's doing this, just like naturally stripping and putting on this gear, and like it's the most natural thing in the world, in front of her boyfriend who is running the boat, and Ian McCullough, Peter West, is just kind of bemused, staring at her. But what sells it to me is that the scene is about the awkwardness of it and about the fact, and it's really about Tisa Farrow's eyebrow. When she cocks her eyebrow and looks at Ian McCullough, like, yeah. So I feel like that sells it, that justifies it, and makes it comical and not like, leering. I mean, yes, it is male gazy, but still, as soon as we jump into the water with her, by the way, beautiful underwater photography in this movie. Yeah. I cannot wait to see this on 4K and see those coral reefs in 4K. It probably looks incredible. So she's just swimming along, and all of a sudden out comes this zombie who is played by the one Mexican in this movie. His name is Ramon Marquez or Ramon something. Anyway, he was actually the trainer for the shark.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, because the guy, according to my research, so basically the zombie tries to eat her. It's an underwater zombie, which we don't get very many of in movie history, an underwater zombie. He tries to eat her. She swims away by stabbing him in the face with some coral. But she can't swim away because there's a shark in the area, and she's afraid the shark's going to eat her. So then movie history happens. The shark and the zombie fight. And there is no clear winner to this battle. And this battle is real. It's a real shark. There is no fake shark. There is no stock footage used. It's a real stunt guy who turns out to not be a stunt guy because apparently they had a stunt guy all ready to go and do this. He chickened out.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
He chickened out, didn't want to do it. So they got the actual shark trainer, who was this Mexican guy who trained this shark. And apparently he can hold his breath for a really, really long time. So most of the time, he probably just did not even need a respirator. He's just like, and so apparently, according to the lore or accounts from the set, they made him up like the zombie, and he fed the shark before he made sure the shark was like, really well fed and drugged up so that the shark wouldn't actually kill him. And yeah, he played with his pet shark basically in front of a camera. And at one point, they put a prosthetic arm on him. The shark bites the arm off. And then the zombie bites the shark.
I know.
And he with him, pulls him up to the surface, and we never see them again. It's amazing.
It's one of the most remembered scenes of probably most horror films and zombie films in general. If you mention iconic scenes with zombies in them, people are always going to mention the zombie versus shark scene. It never fails. It's just one of those scenes that people just remember, whether they've seen the whole movie or not. I'm pretty sure you can find just that scene on YouTube that's probably been watched 1 billion times.
It's like a King Kong versus Godzilla. I mean, it does further the plot a little bit because apparently the shark hits the boat and damages the drive shaft of the boat. I don't know anything about how boats are operated or mechanical engineering in general, but apparently you can still drive the boat when the drive shaft is damaged, but only for so long. But anyway, so the shark does do something before it gets eaten. Uh, but this, of course, this, of course, leads us into that amazing sequence that you did not get away with today. I think that's part of the magic of this moment is that there'll never be another one like it. There's
No,
never going to be anyone who would be willing to, like, there was no, I'm guarantee you, there was no production insurance on this movie. Nobody, like, Fulci probably had a backup plan where, in case the shark ate him, but I am sure he was not ever going to compensate Ramon's family in case he died. There was no way there were animal rights people on standby to make sure the shark was not hurt. But since it was actually his trainer doing it, I'm pretty sure the shark was not hurt. But nowadays, they would just CGI the shark, or they would just CGI the zombie, or they would just do something around. But no, the fact that they did it for real, and you can tell they did it for real. I mean, the only and it looks pretty seamless. I mean, there's only one little continuity error, but you can kind of tell that there's some bad editing where like the arm is off before the arm is pulled off. But other than that, it's perfect. And Fabio Fabrizi's main zombie theme kicks in, and it just works perfectly with it. And yeah, there's never going to be anything like that ever again.
yeah, it wasn't a very expensive movie. I doubt they had insurance for that.
Kidding me?
Oh my God. Now that you mentioned it like that, I was like, oh yeah, that's yeah, you probably did use the original trainer for the shark. I wouldn't get in that damn pool or in the open ocean with a shark that may or may not bite my arm off. Are you kidding me?
I mean, even they told you, oh, it's okay. He's been fed. He's been sedated. I didn't see you do it.
Yeah, but it's one of those things that makes this film memorable. You have never seen anyone since then come up with something like a zombie versus shark. I still don't think anyone's ever done anything like that.
I think the other thing you could probably do to top it is maybe zombie versus bear. Like a cocaine bear versus zombie. I think that's probably the next thing we're gonna see. It's cocaine. I don't.
You know what? I hate to say this, but The Asylum probably has already done a movie like that.
I would not be surprised. I would not at all be surprised. But anyway, so we go on from there to back to Matul, and we find out Dr. Maynard. Here's one thing I do like about the way this movie is written is the way it deals with his character. Because it makes you think that Dr. Maynard is the villain of this movie. Mm-hmm. Because of his wife. Because of how his wife, played by Greek actress Olga Karikatos, whose name I'm butchering. Poor girl. For many reasons we'll get into later. Anyway, she seems to be like this put upon woman who's like an alcoholic, and she's screaming at him for like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're really doing. You're messing with voodoo rites. And he slaps her. We instantly dislike him because he slaps her. And we think, oh, he is a crazy, mad doctor, because that's what we've been conditioned to accept in horror movies. But that's later on we find out that is not the case. But that night, she's, trying to, I guess, get off the stink of him. So she takes a shower. And that is a gratuitous nudity sequence in the shower. She is very naked. But it also contains one of the few really good jump scares in this movie when we get a POV through the window and then all of a sudden, bah, zombie fingers on the glass. Mm-hmm. That scared the crap out of me when I saw it. I was like, ooh, and the whole sequence from then until she gets killed is shot and structured like a slasher movie. Because we learn two things. Well, first of all, I think it's funny how every time there's a POV shot of a zombie in this, we learn something about the zombie, which is in this world, in the world of zombie, Zombies breathe. They respirate. You could hear them going.
You're right. You're absolutely right. I didn't think about that till now. They do because
So
it's so part of the soundtrack.
yeah. So I mean, it's only there really because to let you know that it's a zombie movie, and also because I think the trope of the heavy breathing slasher, it just goes to let you know that this really is at this point kind of a slasher movie because they go in, they stalk her. I mean, we really see one zombie. We find out it's probably a couple,
Hmm.
but she sees it trying to come in. You don't see anything yet. You just see, them trying to put down the door. She tries to bolt the door with the cupboard, and then all of a sudden, like it's a slatted door. It's a slatted door for a very specific reason, and then bam, the hand comes out, grabs her by the hair, and very slowly pulls her head into a broken splinter of wood, and one goes right through her eyeball.
Yes.
Not quickly, but slowly.
And this is
Which
what, go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish now.
I was gonna say, the only thing I was gonna say about the whole thing is, I mean, it's effective in everything it tries to do. It's shocking. It's revolting. It's goes with Fulci's kind of whole aesthetic of assaulting the viewer's eyes with the imagery, and the eyes being the window to the soul and piercing all that stuff. All that's great, but what I don't like about it is the fact that she can see a freaking spike coming out of her eyeball and she never closes her eye. Really? I close my eye when a freaking eyelash from my long eyelids get into my eye. I would definitely close my eyes when a freaking spike is coming at it. I mean, you still could have had like this, the closed eyelid get impaled and her eye like oozing out the side of it. That would have been cool too, but
Oh my god.
that's the only complaint I have about that sequence.
You know when Fulci was making this film that he didn't think about stuff like logic does not play a key point in this movie at all. You should know that by now. It is all about mood, atmosphere, and just terrifying the audience. Well, assaulting the audience is a better word. Not really terrifying. It's assaulting the audience. With as much gore and useless violence that he can muster. He wants to make the ultimate zombie film, better than that Mexican.
Yes, you're right. You're right. I did say that, and I do think that is true. Um, yeah, I still think, especially if he shot that today, there would have been. I think making it a little more realistic would have made it more painful, because the fact that her eyes are still open and it's clearly a prosthetic that gets pierced. It, I mean, it's still great, but it takes away from what would have been an extra load of viscerality. I mean, kind of like, and I'm sure Fulci was you know a student of this type of this filmmaker. It does remind me a little bit of Un Chien Andalou by,
Oh, yeah.
what's his name, Burnell, Louis Burnell. The first eye trauma on film where they substitute a real woman's eye for a pig's eye, and they literally do slice it open, and you see the clear gel inside the eye just kind of spill all over the place. So like he could have done something like that. But I will say, like, to me, the most horrifying, I mean, to me, the eye gouging thing is not the most awful, horrifying thing, that gore that happens in this movie. We'll come to that in a bit. But to me, the most effective part of that whole gag is not when the eye gets pierced, but the fact that the camera lingers on this horror for a little bit longer, and like something like the appliance almost comes off, but the way it looks, like the head shifts forward a little bit, and it looks like the eye is about to just come out of the socket.
Oh.
Yeah, if you watch it very closely, it looks like she's shifting and the appliance is about to, and it looks like, oh, that would have been the part. If I'd seen this in the theater, I would have been like, okay, no, I can't, like I would. That's one of those moments where like your imagination makes it worse than it actually is. It's a psycho shower scene effect.
Except you get to see everything up to that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that is a perfect example, though, of something that we'll probably talk to you more about when we go into the Beyond, which is my favorite aspect of Fulci as a director. And the thing that I think, whether it's a gory movie or not, the thing that I think is his signature visually is what I call Fulci's lingering camera.
Mm.
Because Fulci's camera doesn't cut away when other directors cut away, whether it's something horrifying or whether it's beautiful. Um, he will he desires to put you in a space that is uncomfortable, that you as a viewer do not want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And he so like puts the lingering camera that just stays on the thing that you are disgusted, repulsed, and terrified of. He just puts it right in your face and makes you live with it. And that's, I think, what really defines his aesthetic overall is the lingering Fulci.
Yeah, but you're right. He does that in a lot of his films. He does that with a lot of key sequences of his films. And the thing is, it's what people remember. People remember the zombie shark sequence. People remember the eyes gouging sequence for a reason. Not because they're 100% authentic and realistic, but because they're so iconic in how much it assaults the viewer. Like when you're talking about, you know people in horror movies who are just assaulted, and you're like, oh, I mean, what's some of your favorite kill scenes in the zombie film? You're probably going to mention the zombie shark sequence, and you're probably going to mention the eye gouging sequence. You
Yeah,
don't remember
it's
anything else in this movie, but
like,
those.
it's going to be right up there with I would say like roads getting ripped to pieces in
Oh yeah.
Day of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
Yeah.
that's probably partially part of the reason why that is up there on the list too. Is not the fact that of the great special effects craft of how Rhodes gets ripped to pieces. It's the fact that he still has dialogue even after he's ripped apart.
Oh God. We watch these movies too often.
So moving on from that glorious monstrosity, okay, yes, with affectionately termed atrocity that we just witnessed. Uh, like we go on for a while, like forgetting she's just been murdered, and I think I was fully expecting to see her as a zombie. Never happens.
Nope.
Like our two leads finally make it to the island after their drive shaft is damaged. They shoot their flares up, and Dr. Maynard's just wandering around he says he's trying to understand the phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main thing, is he wants to understand it. But we still don't know exactly how complicit he is in this whole thing yet. But then, like, I think he talks to his nurse, his lab assistant, who at first I was fully convinced he's having an affair with her. I now realize, no, he's not screwing anybody in this movie. But anyway, so like she tells him like there's more people who died, and they got they body them up in those white shrouds and put them in a mass grave, which I think is one of the more iconic moments in this movie. I don't know why, but like especially in post-COVID world, the fact that I know that at the beginning of the COVID epidemic there was mass graves in New York. I remember hearing that. I never saw it. They never took any pictures of it, but that stuck with me, that there were mass graves in American soil. So I guess that's probably why. I mean, also I forgot to mention that, like, of course, this movie was made in 1980. So guess what you see in the New York Harbor at least 2 or 3 times this movie? You see the two towers.
Yep.
And as somebody who had relatives who were in New York at the time, even now I still get a little ping whenever I see the two towers in a movie. So that's just a little side note that's a little serious. But anyway, so Maynard is doing his thing. He meets the people. He meets our heroes and basically info dumps them on what happened to Tisha Farrell's father and how he was like this brave guy who let let Maynard experiment on him, basically, for the purpose of trying to find a cure for this disease. That's what he calls it. He calls it disease. And I think that's, again, part of what makes this movie brilliant, is that it is, in a subtle and interesting way, about viruses and about how they start.
Yeah.
They start usually in the third world. They start in these little countries that are not prepared to handle the public health emergency that they are. And guys like Maynard are on the front lines of it, and all they're trying to do is try to figure out where it comes from and how do we kill it, and they can't. And that's how it spreads. And maybe that's how the world will really end. It'll start on some little island somewhere. But talking about Maynard, I don't. Fulci doesn't see him as a villain, because when they ask him point blank, "What the hell is going on here? People are rising from the grave. Dead people are rising from the grave, only to be killed a second time." He basically tells them, "I don't know. I have tried everything. I have tried, virology, science, any kind of way to figure out how this has started, where it's coming from." He mentions voodoo, but he also mentions that it brings people back from the dead. But then later on, he says, "I don't believe in voodoo," so that's kind of an inconsistency with this character that I would have changed a bit if I were editing it. But other than that, I think what's cool about his characterization is that he is not a villain. In fact, if you think about it, there are no villains in this movie. He talks about, and actually later on when he talks with his Haitian assistant, oh gosh, what was his name? Lucas. He talks to Lucas about what the heck could possibly be happening, and he mentions the Juju Man. That there's this witch doctor, which, by the way, Juju Man's another word for witch doctor in voodoo. But the Juju Man has been running around screaming like a demon, and he's possessed by 1,000 devils, is what he says. And there's a suggestion that he is the cause of this plague. But yet, we never see the Juju Man. We never even go into that village very much. For all we know, the Juju Man doesn't really exist. He's just a rumor. So Dr. Maynard, contrary to what other horror movies like this and other tropes have,
yeah,
he doesn't. He is just as clueless about this phenomenon as everybody else is. There's no human face to the evil. I think Fulci decides to not show the Juju Man, probably because, for two reasons. Number one, I think he knows that if he does that, if he puts a Haitian face on the evil that's terrifying the world, I think he's going to end up causing some unintentional racism to come through this movie. And I think Fulci knows that, so he is going to go so far as to completely erase a villain from this movie, so that he can be somewhat respectful of Haitian culture and voodoo religion, even though there's very little actual voodoo in this movie. but I just think it's funny how most zombie movies are about human beings are the real monsters. Literally, a zombie is just a human deprived of a soul. That's just, Romero's movies are definitely about that. There's always a villain. There's a Colonel Rhodes. There's a Mr. Cooper. There's always somebody. There's Dennis Hopper's character in Land of the Dead. Yeah. There's always somebody who is making life crappy for the human beings in the zombie world. But this is one of the few zombie movies I can ever think of that have this kind of humanistic, kind of, I would say, Pelagian view of humanity. There are no villains in this. Everybody is just people who are just trying to solve this problem, and they can't. And in a weird way, I think that's kind of, obviously that comes from Fulci's kind of Marxist, kind of humanistic worldview. But in a way, yeah. But in a way, because he does that, I think, people will go back to the ending again later, but people say, "Oh, this is one of the most bleakest endings in horror movie history." But really, I think this is probably one of the more hopeful zombie movies, because of Fulci's kind of exalted view of humanity, because there's no villains in this, and therefore I think that he's trying to say that in spite of all of this, you know, there's no like conspiracy behind it that caused it and is going to keep causing it. You know, everybody's just trying to do their own. And also I just realized like nobody's really selfish in this movie. Everybody kind of helps everybody else out. Nobody backstabs anybody in this movie. Nobody like leaves anyone behind to just get eaten by zombies. None of that happens in this movie. So it's actually a very kind of hopeful kind of portrayal of humanity. And also, I mean, spoilers, also like the epidemic itself is not worldwide. There's no suggestion that this is happening in the world. It's just an outbreak that goes into a super populous area. But, you know, with the humanity like this, they could probably get this under control in a few weeks.
Not unless you're like me and you saw this when you were too young and then you didn't realize, or you eventually realized that it's supposed to be a sequel to Dawn of the Dead, but in reality you start to think that it's more like a prequel. That's how that's how I viewed it after I realized it was supposed to be a sequel behind that. I looked at it, this is how the zombie apocalypse started.
That's what I thought after I. That is what I thought after I first saw this. I thought, you know, this really isn't a sequel to Dawn of the Dead. This could definitely be a prequel to Dawn of the Dead.
But of course, you know, the zombies are completely different types of zombies.
Oh yeah, for sure. And they rise from the grave, which leads us to the other big iconic moment from this movie, which is I had it written down how they got to this point, but somehow they run around, they get in the woods. Oh yeah, their car crashes. Now I remember.
Yeah, I think they leave the house where Maynard's wife is, I believe.
Oh yes, we can't talk about that. They find her dead body, not zombified, but being eaten. It's been hours she's been dead because she died at night. Now it is the day, and there are zombies. It's the first time they discover zombies, I think, aside from, you know, the shark thing. But like again, this is where Fulci is different from Romero in that he decides to let's do it better than the Mexicans. So he has the zombies eating Olga Caracos, his wife, like the most civilized kind of way that they're eating. They're just picking from her. It's like they're eating grapes, just like slowly, and like there's no zombie feeding frenzies in this movie. They're not. It's not 28 days later. No, these are intelligent, sophisticated Italian zombies. So they. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, come on, where else do you see that?
You know, you bring up a good point. I didn't think about it like that, quite like that, but you bring up a good point. You may actually bring up something new that I had never thought about before.
In fact, if you think about it, these zombies don't really eat very much of the people, aside from that one moment, because like most of the time, all you see is they take a bite out of your neck or they take a bite out of your arm, and that's it. They're satisfied for a while, and they just walk off and bite somebody else. And I thought that was interesting too, because I was talking real quick. I was talking to somebody online, Facebook. Somebody brought up on a group I was in. She's like, you know, in zombie movies, why do they eat people? Because it seems counterintuitive. Because if you're gonna eat, so if like if zombies are eating somebody and they eat them to the bone, there's nothing left. They're not going to be making more zombies. Because you think about it. Now, in Return of the Living Dead, they don't have that problem because all they want is to eat your brains.
Yeah.
And the rules in that movie is you can be a totally brainless zombie and still walk around and try to eat brains. I don't know how that makes sense, but okay, but that is the rules. So that at least can perpetuate a cycle. Whereas in the Romero zombie world, it's a wonder that they even spread the disease. But at least in that one, they have the conceit of you don't have to be bit. It's like you can die of natural causes in the Romero zombie world and still come back as a zombie because there's something cosmically wrong with the Earth in that universe.
Didn't
In
he?
this movie, yeah, in this movie, there is something cosmically wrong, but also but also these zombies seem to like know, hey, if we eat too much, we won't have any more zombies. So they just bite and go. And the human who is barely eaten then can rise as a zombie.
Oh my God. When you apply logic to these movies,
It makes them so much better, doesn't it?
uh, at least much more comical. So the next time I watch this movie, I will at least have a different outlook on it than I've ever had before.
Yes, and I hope other people think of that too. But yeah, so they run from these people, and I'm sorry, these zombie people. And by the way, I love the fact that Ian McCullum stabs one of the zombies in the head with an antelope skull. So these like I've never seen that before. That's pretty awesome. So they run, they they go into the jungle, they crash the car because, of course, well, no, because they're avoiding another zombie in the road and they hit him. So that's cool. At least that makes sense. And that's when they're running and come across a little grave in the middle of the jungle with tombs. He's like, and like saying, like, and Mr. Redbeard finds a very well preserved, by the way, conquistador's helmet in the ground. Like, huh, he's supposed to be from the 16th century. Meanwhile, Tisa Farrow and Ian McCullough have just decided that they really are actually in love and start making out on the great ground. And then, bam, a conquistador zombie hand reaches up from the ground and pours Tisa Farrow's hair. And that is when we get one of the most iconic zombie rising from the grave moments in history. And that's when we see the star of this movie, the zombie from the poster, which honestly, they need to make an action figure out of that zombie. I would buy it and I would put it up on my shelf next to Frankenstein. Because although I'm sorry to say, though, you don't really see very much of him below the shoulder.
No,
so whoever makes that mod to like figure out what else he looks like under there. But whoever that actor is playing him, I think he's like a 6 foot tall Italian football or soccer player. Sorry, and he rises up, his worms spill out of his eyes, and he smiles at topless skin diver, and I don't know about you, Kevin, but I think that moment when he rips out her throat is even more just like awful than even the eye gouging scene because A, we care a little bit about about Skin Diver Girl.
yeah.
And also just like they tear open her throat and you see the inside of the jugular and it's just like spurting, gushing blood, and she is screaming a silent scream, and it just goes on and on and on, and then boom, dead.
I think you're right. Sorry, I was thinking a little. I was trying to figure out if they had actually made an action figure of the zombie from Zombie, and I think you're right. I don't think they ever have.
They should, dang it. I mean, Tarman's an action figure. Why can't that?
I mean, all of the iconic zombie figures from Romero's Dawn of the Dead have been made into action figures. There's a mask. There is a mask of that zombie that you can get. A really high quality mask. It's actually really nice. I haven't gotten it yet. It's on my wish list. Because I collect masks of iconic films like that. But yeah, you're right. There is no action figure. Man,
I think it's amazing. Like, I mean, we can't not talk about the significance of the fact that they're Spanish conquistador zombies that are coming out of the ground.
Yes, you know what? When I watch that scene now, it reminds me of the Tomb of the Blind Dead movies. But
yes, yes, I did not think about that until now, but you're absolutely right. Yes,
I love those movies too. Yeah. But yeah, when I first saw this, I just thought it was really cool. But now that I've seen all of the Tomb of the Blind Dead movies, and I watch those probably every 2 years or so, I kind of now see that every time I watch Zombie, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool, because no one does those type of zombies. I think Tomb of the Blind Dead's one of the only films that did those type of zombies, and then they didn't like catch on. So
Yeah,
you know, Fulci,
yeah. I mean, I'm personally like when I see Spanish conquistador zombies come out of the ground in the context of where they are, I think, whoa, this is Fulci taking a stab at colonialism.
mm,
The
that
idea that
too.
the demons of colonial, Spain are coming back to haunt us. You know,
That's an interesting interpretation. I didn't think about that, but you could be absolutely right, because this is supposed to take place in a third world country of which Menard has no idea why this is happening or how he can stop it. But maybe it's all happening because he is there.
right? And also, I think I've just realized this is that Maynard can't figure out the. I mean, my gosh, it's so sad. You think about it, like he can't even begin to find a cure for this because he can't even figure it out. Like he is a stand-in for science. He's Western medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Medicine and science cannot find an explanation for this because they lack the vocabulary to even deal with something like this, because science by its very nature cannot deal with anything beyond the material world. It simply cannot. It cannot touch the question of the supernatural because it doesn't allow that at all in
No.
their lexicon. So that's why he's helpless to stop this force. But also, I think there's a sort of a gestalt kind of thing going on here, where the thing about voodoo is that, and they mention this in the movie, voodoo, when they ask, what is voodoo? He says, well, voodoo is a mixture of Catholicism and ancient African tribal rites all mixed together to create this third thing, voodoo. But the thing of it is like voodoo is made from these two opposing things, European Catholicism, and who brought Catholicism to this part of the world? The Spanish. And well, of course, Fulci being a commie Marxist, he hates Catholicism. That's part of the reason why the burns at the end of this movie. But also, I think like the idea of a religion that blends Christianity and tribal superstition and voodoo is this kind of idea of like law and chaos. Because to Fulci, Catholicism represents oppression and structure, but tribal superstition represents chaos. So it's like law and chaos come together in voodoo, and because Maynard may have law, he can't understand chaos. He can't stop voodoo.
Interesting. You're absolutely correct. I didn't think about that. See, this is why we have these conversations. Now, when I watch it again, I'm gonna have a whole new outlook on seeing certain aspects of the movie. Although I need to probably do the same. Well, this is something that has never been mentioned that I can recall from any of the various movies, books that I've read on Fulci's filmography, and I've read several. My book collection is very extensive on a lot of my favorite horror directors. I think I have 4 or 5 that have been dedicated to Fulci himself. So
Wow.
that is not something that's ever been mentioned in any of them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Fulci was conscious of this, but honestly, with as much as Fulci's work is all about the subconscious and um, looking deep in the dream imagery and things like that, I think he'd be okay with us reading stuff like that into it.
Yeah.
I think he'd be totally fine with that. God rest him. So yeah, so I mean, and also it makes me think of one of the best reviews to this movie I read, and it's like right at the top of the IMDb list, where on Metacritic, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said it best when they said that there's something primal, even biblical, about Fulci's zombie movies. There's like a tribal spirituality to it in a way, and yeah, and I think I agree with that, especially in the biblical sense, because whether atheist Fulci likes it or not, um, the very concept of zombies is an apocalyptic in a religious sense of the word, and also a biblical concept, and also like even a Near Eastern idea. This idea of hell and the being damned includes a cadaverous existence. I think some Mesopotamian ideas of the underworld show people wandering around rotting forever. That's what a zombie is. But also the Bible picks up that too, because when it talks about the second coming and it talks about the end of the world, talks about there's two resurrections at the end of the world. There is the resurrection of the believers in Christ who rise to incorruptibility, meaning immortality, like Jesus did. But then there's everybody else who rises to corruption, and corruption meaning to rot. So again, you have that Near Eastern idea of the cadaverous, hellish existence. So basically, that's saying there's going to be people who will be rising as walking corpses. They will rise to corruption. And yeah, I think that's so I think that's ingrained in us in a deep, deep way because it's been around with us for so long.
Yeah. But the idea brings it to fact. The way you worded it is exactly how you can see the decay and the corruption coming into New York Harbor and New York City at the very end of the film, with that iconic image of the zombies walking on the Golden Gate Bridge, I believe it is.
Oh, no, that's the Brooklyn Bridge.
Brooklyn Bridge. Sorry.
Brooklyn Bridge. Wait a minute. Before I ask, my family is from New York. Where do you hail from originally?
I don't help. I've never even been to New York. That's why I was like, I need you to correct me because I've never been to New York.
Okay, I will correct you on that. Yeah, but I'm sorry. Before we get into that, I just want to touch base on the most amazing sequence before that. Is like they get together and they got a hole up in this church, which is that is where, of course, we get the action sequence. Like I think that is where you get this definitely was an action movie at one point because we got guns. We got lots of guns. Maynard and our two characters and whoever is surviving from his nurse's staff, they all just hole up in this church and fight the zombies and let them come in. They bottleneck them, which is a pretty okay strategy, except for the fact that you're throwing Molotov cocktails in a wooden structure. You're gonna burn yourselves to death with these zombies, but okay. But it looks amazing. They're throwing cocktails, and Tisa Farrow, God bless her, is actually doing something in this movie because after they find out about her death, family has nothing to do, but she does help them kill zombies, and man, they kill a lot of them. Oh, and it just gets worse, because the epidemic comes in, they come in through the back, they kill Maynard, they kill Lucas, they both become zombies and get shot in the head, and oh gosh, the music comes in, and it's just amazing seeing zombies on fire and walking.
But it's an amazing action sequence that you're not expecting in this movie. It's been a slow build up until this point.
Yeah, because Fulci knows you got to end with a bang, and he wants this to be the most zombie movie. I put them all in. This is also the first time we've seen them at night, so that's part of the. Oh, by the way, again, he punctuates these long shots of zombies walking in the woods at night with these extreme close-ups of a zombie. He picks like one really well made up zombie and just like puts him in your face. And what I find cool about the way that these zombies are is he made a conscious choice to make them up and cause them to. This is part of the whole debate of, do you prefer fast zombies or slow zombies? I don't know about you, Kevin, but I personally prefer a slow zombie. Because, yeah, sure, they're not going to catch up to you, but it doesn't matter. They'll get you anyway because there's too many of them.
Many of them.
And you see the slow zombies, but they're not just slow zombies. They are sleepwalking zombies. Their eyes are closed. Their heads bobbing to their side like this. There's a reason for that. You know what that reason is?
No, tell me.
I thought you would have figured that out. No, it's because apparently Fulci did some research and found out that that's what real zombies look like. He went to, or he read books of people who had been to Haiti, and said that when people who are under the spell of the zombie drug that the voodoo wizards called the Bokors put on people, when they're up and about out from their grave, where they dig them up rather, their their eyes are closed usually. They walk around listlessly, and their heads usually hanging by their side. So that's why these zombies look like that. He wanted these zombies to look authentic. So very rarely in this movie do you see zombies with eyes open. You see one zombie that's got a crooked eye, her eyes are open, and there's only one other zombie that I can think of off the top of my head that has her eyes open, and it is poor topless skin diver. Because she comes back. I think she's the only character who is like a main character in this movie who gets zombified and comes back, which is part of the horror of zombie movies, is your loved ones you saw die in horrible ways come back, and they want to eat you.
You want to eat you.
And poor, poor.
You're talking about the in sequence. You gotta go out with a bang, and it's a lot of action in there.
I know, yeah. It's like, the way that comes, like, Beard gets bit by his love. They kill her, and he's like, "Kill me, kill me." They're on that boat, and what's funny, you keep mentioning that sequence, though apparently the New York sequences were added after the fact.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean, not that they were shot, not that they were like the movie was finished and they went back and shot them. It's that they weren't in the original script. Like, as soon as Dawn of the Dead came out and they were in production, like, oh, wait a minute, how's about this? We gonna put we will float you. We will fly you to New York, and you will shoot some parts of your movie in New York. Zombies in New York, like a Dawn of the Dead. Like, okay, fine, as long as you're fitting the bill, okay.
You know what? Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that.
So that's what they did, and yeah, our poor lead characters are just like hanging out on the boat for whatever. Oh, not for whatever reason. They tell you the reason that they won't kill Beard and put him out of his misery.
Yeah, they want to show.
Ian McCulloch's like, we gotta have somebody to show for it. We gotta prove this is happening.
Yep.
Of course, they turn on the radio and find out they don't need to keep Beard alive and prove it because everybody knows what's happening.
Yeah, I know. That's one of the great things about that sequence is they hear that over the radio and it's like, oh, shit.
Yeah, and that's where we ended that iconic little sequence of zombies crossing the Brooklyn Bridge.
Thank you.
Heading on into New York with the two towers looming and fatalistically, I think, in the background.
Hell. Fatalist, yes. Oh my God.
Yeah. It's amazing how life is sometimes, huh? But anyway, it's like, what's fun about that sequence is like, apparently that was stolen footage.
Oh, I did. Yeah, it had to be stolen footage, dude. This Fulci, he probably had $2.
Apparently, the way they did it, according to IMDb, is, I don't know if you heard this, but they, like, Fulci got his zombie crew and his 2 camera guys, which they didn't have to shoot sound because Italy never shoots sound. So really all we had was 2 camera guys, a bunch of zombies, and a van. And they got them all in a van and put them up on the Brooklyn Bridge. And apparently they had a production assistant as a lookout. Looked around. Okay, the coast is clear. And they just rolled out, got their shots. Some people on the bridge honked at them, but other than that, nothing happened. Nobody called the cops. New York City, zombie people on the Brooklyn Bridge. Nobody called the cops. Nobody said anything. And they were out there in like less than an hour.
You got to keep in mind that back then, New York filmmakers used to steal shots all the time. You know, you hear the stories about the French Connection. If you've seen that movie where they're driving through the streets of New York, They didn't have permits when they were driving that shit. They're not all stunt cars in that sequence.
Oh man,
You
yeah,
know,
you could not get away with that nowadays.
oh hell no, you couldn't get away with that nowadays. But back then, dude, no, what? Yeah, I can just
Yeah,
imagine how old school movies used to film. They just stole shots all the time, and it
I think probably because of the fact that he was Italian and was an Italian company making it, I think he was pretty certain that the Americans are not going to sue me for this. Come on, they don't care. Of course, they didn't.
it,
They didn't. But Fulci would come back to New York several times. Most notably with his last kind of big horror movie, which was the New York Ripper, a
mm-hmm.
movie that a movie that really does hate women. Apparently, I have not seen it.
Oh,
I
you
have heard.
haven't?
No, have you?
Yeah, I told you I've seen all of his movies almost. I've seen all of his horror movies. I can have them all. I have like a whole collection of Fulci movies, dude.
Yeah. Woo. Dang. Yeah. New York Ripper. They
So,
they rip stuff. They do
so,
rip some stuff.
so let me just tell you this, and everyone else who's listening to this, all about Fulci. Fulci's style of filmmaking is not exactly the most PC. It is heavily dated and almost racist if some and sexist in some corners. But it was what the Italian market was full of. It wasn't something that you didn't see in the late 70s and 80s. It was very common. So therefore, their cops are male chauvinist pigs a lot of the time. You know, these type of things are things you wouldn't see today. So when you watch a Fulci movie now, you have to step back into the decade in which he was making them. The police were hardcore cops with no redeeming qualities, and they were male chauvinist pigs, and these type of attitudes, and the slight racism of the late 70s, early 80s is just part of his movies. I saw, luckily or unluckily, I guess, I saw most of these in my early or mid-teen and late-teen years, and then when I got into my 90s, in the 90s, not my 90s, in the 90s, I started to study and try and find as many of his films as possible. I've not seen them all because, like we've said, he made a lot of films in a lot of different genres, and there are a lot of his films that just have never been translated to the English language, and they're still just Italian, and there's no distributor who's looking for old Fulci movies. Like, his horror films are what he's known for. It's what has traveled internationally to lots of other countries. His earlier films are more for us film geeks who just want to see what he did in his early career, but they don't have a bigger market. And now that streaming has taken over and physical DVD sales have dwindled, we probably won't see them anytime soon, unless
I
you
will
find
say,
on YouTube.
yeah, I mean, I will. You're right. Everything you say is 100% correct. I will say, like, God streaming in the sense for this movie, because I probably would not have seen this movie if it were not for streaming. Because, like I said, I first saw that picture in a magazine somewhere and thought, "Wow, that looks out there. That looks obscure." But now with streaming, almost nothing is obscure nowadays. And even if it's not available in the States, you at least know it exists because it's on IMDb. You'll at least have a description of it in broken English of this Japanese snuff movie from like the 80s that is just not going to be available in the States probably ever, but you at least know it exists. But back then, back in the 90s, like, you had to really fight tooth and nail to find these. It's almost like, I guess, like people hunting for buried treasure or people trying to find drugs. You got to find the guy who knows a guy. I got a copy. Freaking Duckling. Fulci's first horror movie. You gotta see it. It's new. It's new.
Well, like I said, I knew the Beyond is Seven Doors of Death. And we'll hopefully be able to discuss that one in a later episode. And this one I knew was Zombie 2. I didn't know it was, really just zombie for years. I saw a lot of this stuff when it was coming out, or probably the 80s were very prolific for me. I saw a lot of stuff in the 80s as a kid. Uh
Oh,
Not just the mainstream stuff. My friends, my brother's friend used to get him bootlegs of lots of movies that I would have never seen had I not had bootlegs. I would have never seen the Evil Dead 2 or Evil Dead had it not been bootleg copies of it. Like my video store didn't have Evil Dead 2 when it first came out. My brother's friend had it on bootleg. I mean, I saw Akira, the animated movie classic, for the very first time on a bootleg. I didn't see, like, it wasn't at a video store for me to just go rent Akira in the fucking 80s. I couldn't just go to any, I couldn't go, like, now it's one of the most hailed anime films ever. But in the 80s, anime films weren't really popular, Or I guess
they weren't.
I saw it late 80s, early 90s, I guess is when I saw Akira. Somewhere around there. Because I saw it when I was in middle school. So whenever the hell that was, a long time ago. So I saw those movies when they were coming out, but my friend had it like the end for bootlegs. He had bootlegs of everything, you know.
Wow. A bootleg friend when I was a kid. I had, man, I had the video store maybe, or I had like, premium cable channels that my mom paid for, and I would record things off of HBO or Showtime or Cinemax, or although there was a brief period in the late '90s, early 2000s where there was a lot of pay cable channels. There were things like Flicks, which doesn't exist anymore,
Hmm.
which I'm not even sure what their whole thing was, but they had a lot of random obscure movies I would see on. I can't even remember half the stuff, but every now and then I'd be like, oh yeah, somebody will be post about some strange movie or something. Like, oh yeah, I saw that on Flicks years ago. Dang, that was weird.
So I don't like
But
to plug streaming services that much, but I will say anyone who likes to watch these kind of obscure films can find a lot of them surprisingly on Tubi. But also Shudder is where I started to find a lot of them during the pandemic. I got when
mhm.
during the pandemic hit, I decided to purchase Shudder, and I realized that they had a lot of Italian movies and foreign films on there that I couldn't find anywhere else. Uh,
Yeah, God bless Shutter. That is where I saw Zombie and the Beyond and City of the Living Dead was on Shutter. Probably also because if I'm not mistaken, I think Shutter is probably one of the only places of streaming that you will find this movie Zombie in its uncut format without commercials. Because
oh.
I don't have Shutter right now because money's a little tight. Hopefully, Lord willing, next year money will get a little better and I'll be able to purchase it again. But so when I rewatched this movie recently, I had to look elsewhere. The only place I could find it was on Pluto TV with
Well,
with lots of commercials that were very annoying, and I could swear that this is not the full version. I could swear some things were missing, but I wasn't sure exactly what. But yeah, you gotta when you seek these things out, ladies and gentlemen who are listening, you gotta go on IMDb and mark well the runtime, because oftentimes these movies have different run times because they got cut and censored, and you don't want the censored version. You want the full Fulci.
yeah, yeah. Oh, oh my God. So yeah, you'll have to be Thomas, you're gonna have to get into the Fulci House of Craziness and start watching some of his more obscure films. Because there's a ton of them. And
I do,
I
I do want to see Don't Torture a Duckling, which is one of his earlier movies. That's not really. It is horror, but it's not.
it's a
It's not.
Giallo.
Yeah, it's more of a traditional giallo.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, but I hear it's very, very interesting. I think that one's probably the one where he's most openly critical of the Catholic Church. But yeah, but I hear it's very, very well done. And it's also like, again, like I said, it's not like, he's called the Godfather of gore, but that's only because of these movies he made in the late '80s. Don't Torture a Duckling is hardly any gore in it. So he's like we said before, Mr. Fulci was a much more wider. It's the breadth of his talent was a lot more than just these 4 or 5 movies that he made in the late '70s and early '80s.
Uh, I've seen most of his films now. Wow, crazy. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, he directed. He wrote the live films I have not seen. I did not realize he did a version of White Fang. That's very disturbing.
that's right. Yes, he did. And for a second, I thought I'd already seen that because I saw a version of White. I saw the White Fang with Charlton Heston in high school, and I thought, was that the one Fulci directed? And then I looked it up and was like, oh no, it's not. That's not that one. It's a different one.
Yeah, I that's probably when I looked up at one point and probably could not find because I don't know why they make these damn movies so hard to find.
Licensing.
Yeah, and the problem is that they're foreign films, and they may never have had an English subtitle track, or they may never have dubbed it. But they dubbed every fucking Italian film back in the day because they didn't shoot live sound. So
Yeah. A lot of that is because well, there's some very interesting reasons for why they never shot live sound, aside from the fact that it was cheaper to do that, and in post-war Italy, they did not have. They had mostly old silent movie cameras, so of course they didn't have the technology and they couldn't afford to upgrade it. But also, even if they wanted to upgrade it, the Mussolini government wouldn't let them because
oh, that's right.
yeah, because if you had to post record sound, that made it easier for the government to monitor what you were doing.
You are correct. I completely forgot about that. Yep.
Yeah. But this movie, Zombie, apparently was a huge hit in Italy, and that's probably why we're able to see it today, because it made goat loads of Italian dollars. I don't know what the I think it's lira or whatever is the Italian dollar.
Wow. Yep. So, but yes, I would like to say that Zombie has, and this is one of our longer discussions because it is a film that we wanted to dive deep into, and both of us absolutely enjoyed. Um,
So much to talk about in it. I mean, come on.
well, yeah, there. You know what? We probably wouldn't talk about a Christopher Nolan film as much as we just talked about Zombie.
Because we're strange. We understand. I hope you guys understand that at home. We hope you're strange like us.
So, any final words about the movie Zombie before we move on from this episode for this evening?
Yes, I think I'd like to say that if I were to, and I'd probably ask you this question too, if I were to rank this, I mean, we will rate this movie as well with our special picked objects from it in a little bit. But ever since I first saw it during the pandemic, um, I I started writing my own zombie movie called No Room in Hell, and it's probably one of the best scripts I've ever written, and and it's got Fulci through its DNA through and through. I think we'll talk more about that when we talk about The Beyond, because The Beyond has thoroughly influenced my script more than anything. So that's something to look forward to. But Zombie, as I like to call it, um, as a straight zombie movie, because I would not call The Beyond a straight zombie movie. It's got a lot more going on.
Yeah.
It's more of a haunted house movie, but I would definitely put this in the top three zombie movies of all time, with number one for me being Evil Dead 2, number two being George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, the original, and Zombie would be number three for me. Everything else is struggling for number four.
Well, interesting. I won't tell you my list. Only I would tell you a story that a story I did. So, as a young teenager, and I hope my friends aren't watching this, the ones I subjected this to, I did a triple feature with Zombie as the very first at-home screening I've ever done, open to all my friends. I think we had 15 people there or so. that surprisingly came to watch me showcase 3 fucking zombie films because I didn't think people were taking these movies seriously enough when I was in high school. One of them was Zombie, one of them was Evil Dead 2, and the one that I absolutely loved but no one else seemed to like at all was Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
Oh, I want to see that Bob Clark's zombie movie. Yeah.
I love the movie, but no one else in the party liked that movie. They loved Zombie. That was a big hit. They absolutely loved Evil Dead 2. Thankfully, I ended the night with Evil Dead 2. Started it off with Zombie, got everybody in the mood, killed the mood when I played Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, and then everyone got all into it again when I played Evil Dead 2. So that's my story about Zombie. Me trying to tell people about this film that I thought was amazing when I was a kid. I saw it when I was in middle school, and then as a high schooler, I will always want to be a filmmaker. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to do a triple feature screening. I believe it was actually either on Halloween or around Halloween when I did this. I think that's why I did the whole thing. But yes, I could tell you that Zombie was a huge hit because it had everyone's gasping throughout the whole film. Unfortunately, no one cares for Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things because it's a very long, drawn out drama that just happens to have zombies at the end. And, and of course, Evil Dead 2. Everyone loves fucking Evil Dead 2. So, with that, I want to thank everyone for listening to us rant about Lucio Fulci's Zombie, and I want to thank Thomas for coming in and joining me on this. I don't get to rant like this as often as I would like to, but who else will care about me talking about one of my favorite subject matters, which is zombie movies? So I want to thank you all for joining me for your conversations in horror. Please make sure to check us out on social media and check out some of our previous videos. You will find some of the more serious stuff with other films, or you can just find some of the films like this where we just rant and rave about the horror. Everyone out there, thank you so much and have a good evening.
So there's one question we have left for you and the audience, maybe at home after they watch this, which is how many things would we rate this movie? The object I pick, a zombie shark. Because even though they don't show it in this movie, I think that this shark in this movie got bit by that zombie and became a zombie shark. And bit other sharks and made other zombie sharks. And that is a whole other movie. So I would rate this movie let's say 4.5 zombie sharks out of 5.
Okay, you give it 4.5. I'm gonna go ahead and go higher than you. I'm gonna give it 5 zombie sharks, mostly because I grew up on this movie and I've seen it a whole shit ton of times. And it never gets boring to me. I still can watch it now and it never gets boring to me. It's one of the Fulci's only films that I have never gotten bored watching. So. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, produced by Kevin L. Powers, executive produced by Kelly A. Inoka, and originally filmed via Zoom technology. Conversations in Horror is hosted by Kevin L. Powers and co-hosted by various horror film lovers and filmmakers. To learn more about Mr. Powers, please make sure to check out his Patreon page and other social media platforms. Conversations in Horror is copyright 2024 Broken Lighthouse Pictures production.